Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy Pros. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined as I am every Monday by Tara Roberts. We are talking moves to make ahead of the next week. We have a whole week to make these moves. This is now going into week 5, so it's 5 moves to make before week 5 here. Quick reminder for everybody that all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Tara, last week we had some big name receivers on the list. I'm curious what direction we're going this time around. What do you got for us to start things off?
We're gonna do things. It's gonna be a fun little list here. It's gonna be a little bit different than last week. We're gonna start off with a buy though. Last week we talked about buying Drake London. Hey, if you bought him, it worked out. Because if you can figure out whether or not a player's lack of production is actually their fault or just the production being down due to short-term circumstances, you can actually take advantage of it. So when we were looking at Drake London, the matchups were the short-term circumstances that were holding him back. When we're looking at Brock Bowers as a nice little buy candidate here, we're going along that same logical concept here, but it's not the matchups that are the issue. It is the physical nature of his injury that he has been playing through that's holding himself back. He's not the same player that we've seen in the past, or even in beginning of week 1, when he played roughly 50% of the snaps before getting injured. He had over 100 yards in that game. He looked fantastic. And he's ended up playing through this injury, and good for him. That's awesome. He's in our fantasy lineups, but unfortunately, you can just tell that he's really not himself right now. When we look at his production last year, and once he kind of finally got going there and progressed towards the middle of the season, Bowers was playing upwards of 90% of snaps, literally every single game. When we look at his production this year, he's not hit that mark at all. Not one single game here. So when he's healthy, he is still himself. He just has to get healthy here. The good news is that while he's getting healthy, he's at least giving us a nice floor play. So if you're buying him, it's not like you're buying an injured CeeDee Lamb and you're just waiting for him to get healthy. You're buying Brock Bowers. You can play him right now. And then once he gets fully healthy, he's playing through that injury with the knee brace right now. At some point when he gets back to himself, we're going to see the regular Brock Bowers, especially because aside from Trey Tucker, we haven't really seen Jacoby Myers pop. We finally saw Ashton Jeanty pop. The offense still needs Brock Bowers and needs him to have volume. We just need him to get healthy.
Yeah, I was going to bring up, even just looking at yesterday's box score, he led the team in receiving yards. It was only 46 yards, but he led the team in receiving yards, second on the team in targets. He led the team in receptions. Jacoby Myers was the only other player to have more than 2 targets in the game for the Raiders. It was Myers and Bowers, and everybody else was at 1 or 2. So there's not this strong target competition, obviously, like you just laid out for us. Do you worry at all when Bowers does get healthy that Geno just isn't playing very well and the offensive line is bad and that the offense as a whole might put a cap on Bowers' ceiling? And I guess from that perspective, would you still see him when healthy as tight end 1 like he was in the consensus rankings rest of the season, or would he now more be a tier 1 tight end but maybe not tight end 1?
Yeah, it's definitely more tier 1. And to be fair, that's kind of how I had it structured before the draft. It was kind of a tier 1 of him and Trey McBride, George Kittle, very interchangeable there. Now we've got, obviously, season starts, and we've got other guys creeping in here that are very solidified. Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft here as well. But yeah, more of a tier 1, maybe not the exact same upside that he had before, but still potential overall tight end 1 on a regular basis. The offense as a whole, not a big concern from me, just because we saw the Raiders be objectively awful last year and he thrived there. So Geno obviously is going through some struggles. I don't know if it's going to turn around for him as the season progresses, but for the offense to move forward, 1, they need to focus on getting Jeanty going. They got that. And then for the pass game, they have to focus on getting Brock Bowers going, and maybe that will truly help him get on track.
Who's your next player to buy?
My next player to buy here, now this is where we're going the more of the non-traditional route. Not everything has to be a buy low. We talked about last week when I talked about recommending buying Michael Pittman as an underpriced buy because of the perceived value here. Other players on the team have more hype, don't view him as a true wide receiver 1, skepticism of Daniel Jones. So you can grab him on the cheap and get a wide receiver one that can get you a top 24 production every single week. That's the same exact concept here that I have with my second buy here in Travis Etienne. Perception there. Hype is around Bashal Tootin. You can't get around that. I mean, he's awesome. I get it, right? We want to lean into those rookies. But despite that, I don't believe that Tootin will be stealing his job anytime soon. The snaps have been very consistent for Travis Etienne. Despite his worst finish being literally RB21 in PPR, he is still not viewed as the most valued asset in that backfield. He is top 10 in attempts. He is averaging 6.1 yards per carry. There are only two running backs that have more 20-plus yard runs than him, Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry. Perhaps he's just good. Perhaps maybe he's just turned things around. He's thriving in this offense. And our issue is not Bashal Tootin. It's, the only issue that we have with Travis Etienne is that Trevor Lawrence isn't checking down enough. But the volume here has been just so solid for Travis Etienne. He's been a solid RB2, giving you weekly RB1 upside. And because of that perception that Bashal Tootin is coming for his job, you can get him on the cheap here. So if you're looking, you need a guy who can give you top 20 points every single week. That is Travis Etienne, and you can buy low, even though he is performing at a high level.
Where do you have him ranked rest of season?
Rest of season, I still have him as a top 20 back. I trust it. I like Bashal Tootin. Two backs can operate in that system. We know Liam Cohen's offense, especially if we get Trevor Lawrence pushing further in the right direction and get Brian Thomas Jr. pushing as well. They can both thrive in that offense, but I see him as the lead back and a trustworthy top 20 back rest of season.
I only have Etienne on one roster this year, and I pretty much, it was like that, the week one test, you see it once and you're like, okay, I messed up. I wish I had invested more heavily in him. And that's how I felt for the season. Like even with Tootin, like having a degree of hype around him, like I'm with you on Etienne. I wish I had him in more places, and maybe I'll have to go, spend up to get him in more places after his first month of the year. If you want a chance to win the funniest, most infamous prize in fantasy football, the Golden Toilet Trophy, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy football hardware, then this is your moment. This shining gold toilet is the ultimate symbol of failure, designed to immortalize the last place finisher in your league. It's hilarious, it's bold, and it's guaranteed to bring endless trash talk. To enter, all you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on any of our videos. That is it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss your chance to claim this trophy and make last place unforgettable. Who, Tara, is the next player you want to talk about?
We're going to go from the happy buys here to the unfortunate sells. We're going to sell DeAndre Swift here. So when we were talking about Travis Etienne, we were talking about somebody who is the RB1 who doesn't have that perceived value here. DeAndre Swift, unlike Travis Etienne, doesn't have the stats to actually justify him as a buy candidate there. He's the RB1 in that backfield. But when you're looking at the statistics, I don't have a lot of faith in him moving forward through the remainder of the season in terms of trustworthiness that I feel like we've gotten Etienne. Etienne and Swift are essentially in the same category, right? RB1s that aren't really seen as the lead back, that we can trust because of the perceived lack of job security here. And as a result, you end up getting these underpriced running backs that you can grab at value here, especially if you're dealing with your RB1 or RB2 having injury issues or poor production issues. But the difference here is that Travis Etienne is actually doing his job well. So we want to invest in that. Swift is not doing his job well. And that's a concern there, considering that we do have a ton of volume in the Chicago offense. So to not be thriving at this point when you have a high volume pass offense there, and you're also someone who benefits from a lot of checkdowns, but you still don't have that incredible ceiling. You're not thriving at the goal line. Ultimately, the problem here is that your job really isn't secure because anyone can take it and snatch it from you at any point. Chicago is one of those teams that often gets tossed around by people of saying, well, if they start progressing forward and they're looking to buy a running back, there's this option and that option. I don't know that we want to invest in Swift long-term here because he may not be the RB1 long-term there.
Would you trade away Swift for somebody like Woody Marks, who is several spots lower in rest of season rankings right now, but obviously we just saw what could have been this breakout game, high upside rest of the way. Somebody like him, would you trade Swift for?
I would, and it's tough because, one, we don't know how much Nick Chubb will actually go away, and then two, you wonder, hey, how good is that Houston offense? Was this just literally the perfect matchup for their offense to thrive? And in other games, are they going to revert back to what we saw before, where you don't really get any upside? But I will say that I do feel more comfortable with Marks because of that receiving upside that he offers as well, and just how effective he's been as an overall runner, that he can work around those offensive line issues. So yeah, and we also get the report, Joe Mixon, we're not expecting him back here. So we're talking about somebody who is with a offense that could progress forward, but has the opportunity for volume, receiving upside, and has more pop and more elusive behavior. It's just a better situation for a running back that can actually still take advantage of the opportunities that he has.
DeAndre Swift is RB26 in our rest of season rankings. That's as of updated from after yesterday's games. Your other running back that you want to sell here is RB24. So a couple of guys in the same range. Who else do you have for us?
Yeah, it's Tony Pollard here. This again is taking advantage, that range that you talk about there, of the guys that are their lead backs. And we've got a lot of people on teams who might be a little bit desperate to get some pop into their offense and want to make that investment into somebody who has some volume here. And that's one thing that Tony Pollard has. He has volume. And I love Tony Pollard. He is surviving off volume right now. He is not thriving off volume. That's the problem. And then at the same time, the big issue here is that, we can deal with Tony Pollard's volume because we know that he is the primary back, but we've got Tajay Spears expected to be activated soon. And while we're not going to be shoving Spears into our fantasy lineups anytime soon, we do know that based off 2024, he makes just enough of a dent to be very irritating for Tony Pollard, and the volume won't be enough for him to remain an RB2. He'll be the lead back, but unfortunately, with the way that the Titans offense is operating right now, there's not a lot of goal line opportunities. There's not a lot of yardage opportunities there. So you were just thriving based off pure volume. And if somebody comes in and starts to creep and take things away, on a week-to-week basis, you are underperforming there. And when we look at the projections for the first 4 games that he's had here, he's already been underperforming, unfortunately. And again, that's not his fault. But when you are consistently hitting below your expected fantasy points, that is a major problem. The offense is stagnant. It doesn't provide upside. And my fear here for Pollard in the offense is that it might be a situation where they have to get a little bit less controlled, let Cam Moore get a little bit wilder, push a little bit more volume, and maybe that ends up benefiting Spears, who has the edge over him in terms of pass volume and receiving work there. So if the Titans can't find a way to produce goal line opportunities, Pollard's ceiling is legitimately 10 fantasy points here. So maybe trying to sell him before we get Tajay Spears out there and making the perception even worse, offload him while you can.
We've got a special offer for everyone. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FP1month. That's the number 1, not spelled out. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it free for 1 month now, available on iOS and Android. Again, that promo code is FP, the number 1 month. All right, we've got one more move to make here. Tara, before week 5, who is it?
We didn't do any drops last week, so I'll go ahead and add a drop in here, a drop that hopefully everyone can finally come to an agreement on. Kaleb Johnson is shockingly over 40% rostered in fantasy leagues. And he is a sensitive subject, right? Because there's a lot of people that are truthers, and it makes sense. Again, we talked about Bashal Tutin. There's hype around rookies, and you get very attached to them as prospects and the opportunities for them in offense. Anytime I talk about Jalen Warren or Kenneth Gainwell, you always get the comment of, I'd rather have Kaleb Johnson. Well, I hope that this game finally provides enough evidence that you got to move on. It's not happening here. Rostering him even as handcuff just isn't realistic, because you are bypassing actual direct handcuffs in order to stash a guy who factually has to have 2 players go down in order to see significant play time. And even then so would probably have the Steelers bring in another back to force it to continue to be a committee, because that's what they love here. This week's game was as definitive as you can possibly get. Gainwell had 19 carries, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was extremely involved in the pass game, had 6 targets, caught all of them. Kaleb Johnson had 6 carries carries for 22 yards. Gainwell app snapped him consistently. If you want a back in this offense outside of Warren, it has to be Kenneth Gainwell. And also, when we look at this offense, I mean, this was a great game on the ground for Kenneth Gainwell, but really, the Steelers' offensive line hasn't been providing a ton of yardage on the ground. Fantasy success for these running backs has been boosted up by their receiving work as well. So that's another dent there for Kaleb Johnson, because when it comes to fantasy value in that offense, you need the receiving work, and that favors anybody but Kaleb Johnson. Unfortunately, you have to drop him and just move on at this point.
Interestingly, he's 43% rostered in Yahoo and 43% rostered on ESPN, the exact same number on both, according to his Fantasy Pros player page. Are we burying Kaleb Johnson in Dynasty too? Like, is this a, hey, like we are just like moving on, and if you can convince somebody in a Dynasty format that there's still value here, that it's worth, because obviously if you're, we're going to try and trade him in a redraft league, you would get nothing. That's why he's a drop, not a sell. In Dynasty, obviously he's not a drop. Would you be trying to sell and say like, I just don't think this is actually ever going to happen? We've seen enough to already feel confident about that. Or would you still be interested in holding him, or even, buying on the cheap in a Dynasty format?
So the problem here is that if he was on any other team, I could make the argument for keeping or buying him on the cheap. But on the Steelers, they're not confusing. They're very straightforward here. When you get into the Steelers doghouse, you're in there, and it's very difficult to get out of. We saw that with Roman Wilson, who was an early round pick, a wide receiver that could have pushed forward and, been a wide receiver too in this offense, couldn't get past a guy like Calvin Austin. It's difficult to get out of the doghouse there with Mike Tomlin. And then we have Arthur Smith, who we don't trust as well. So it's just a bad situation. It's possible that maybe he can move on to another team and get a better opportunity, but hedging on that is difficult. So in Dynasty, he's not much of a buy for me as well, just because of the situation being more detrimental to running backs in general.
We'll wrap things up there. She's Tara Roberts. I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Make these moves before week 5, and we'll see you again next time.